On a hot summer night in July 1991, police officers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, responded to what seemed like a strange but ordinary call. A man was running through the streets. He was terrified. Handcuffs were hanging from one of his wrists, and he kept repeating the same words over and over again. "He tried to kill me. Please help me." The officers followed the man back to a small apartment building nearby. Inside apartment 213, they expected to find a simple misunderstanding. Maybe a drunken argument, maybe a small crime. Instead, they walked into one of the most horrifying crime scenes in American history. Photographs of dismembered bodies, human heads in the refrigerator, a barrel filled with acid and human remains, and sitting calmly on the couch was a quiet man with glasses. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer, and for more than a decade, he had been hiding a nightmare behind the walls of his apartment. The quiet boy Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At first glance, his childhood seemed normal. His father, Lionel Dahmer, was a chemist. His mother, Joyce, struggled with emotional instability and depression. The household was often tense. Arguments were common, and young Jeffrey spent much of his childhood feeling alone. But the real warning signs began when he was still a teenager. Unlike other kids his age, Dahmer became fascinated with death. Not in stories, not in movies, but in real life. He collected dead animals from the side of the road. He brought them home. He dissected them. Sometimes he would dissolve animal bodies in chemicals to study their bones. It was strange behavior, but no one imagined what it might lead to. By the time he reached high school, Dahmer had become a quiet outsider. He struggled to connect with other students. He began drinking heavily, and inside his mind, dark fantasies were growing stronger. Fantasies about control, about power, about people who could never leave. In the summer of 1978, just weeks after graduating from high school, Dahmer committed his first murder. One evening, he picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. Hicks was only 18 years old. The two spent time drinking beer together at Dahmer's parents' house. But when Hicks decided it was time to leave, something inside Dahmer snapped. He didn't want the moment to end. He didn't want to be alone again. So he picked up a dumbbell and struck Hicks in the head. The young man collapsed. Then Dahmer strangled him. It was his first murder. But what happened next showed something far more disturbing. Instead of calling the police or running away, Dahmer calmly dismembered the body. He buried the remains in the woods behind the house. For years, no one knew what had happened, and Dahmer walked free. The dark urges returned. After the first murder, Dahmer tried to live a normal life. He briefly joined the army, but his heavy drinking quickly caused problems, and he was discharged. For several years, his violent urges seemed to fade, but they never disappeared. They were only waiting. In the mid-1980s, the killings began again. Dahmer started visiting gay bars in Milwaukee. There he would meet young men and offer them money for photographs. Sometimes he promised modeling opportunities. Other times he simply offered drinks. The men would follow him back to his apartment. They thought it was just another night out. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. The method. Once inside his apartment, Dahmer would drug his victims. He mixed powerful sleeping pills into their drinks. When they lost consciousness, he strangled them. But killing them was only the beginning. Dahmer did things that shocked even experienced homicide detectives. He photographed the bodies. He dismembered them. He kept skulls as trophies. Some body parts were stored in the refrigerator. Others were preserved in chemicals. And sometimes he kept them close. Because Dahmer didn't just want victims. He wanted control. He wanted people who could never leave him. Over time, his crimes became more and more disturbing. He began experimenting with a horrifying idea. He tried to create what he called living zombies. He drilled small holes into the skulls of unconscious victims. Then he poured chemicals into their brains. His goal was simple. He wanted to create someone who would obey him forever. But every experiment ended the same way. As the killings continued, Dahmer's apartment became a place of horror. Neighbors complained about strange smells coming from his unit. They said it smelled like something rotting. When the landlord asked about it, Dahmer calmly explained that his freezer had broken and some meat had spoiled. Sometimes he said his tropical fish had died. Other times he blamed sewage problems, and somehow, people believed him. Even police officers visited the apartment several times for different complaints. But they never searched deeply enough. Just a few feet away from them, human remains were hidden. The victim who escaped. For years, Dahmer avoided capture. But in July 1991, everything changed. One night he met a man named Tracy Edwards. Dahmer offered him money to come back to his apartment for photographs. At first, it seemed like the same routine as before, but inside the apartment, Edwards quickly realized something was wrong. Dahmer placed handcuffs on one of his wrists. He spoke about strange things, he played eerie music, and he refused to let Edwards leave. For hours, Edwards tried to stay calm. Finally, when Dahmer became distracted, Edwards managed to run. He ran into the street, handcuffs still hanging from his wrist. He found 2 police officers and begged them for help. The officers followed him back to apartment 213, and that was the moment the nightmare ended. Inside the apartment, one officer noticed something unusual. In a drawer near the bed, he found a stack of Polaroid photographs. When he looked closely, his heart stopped. The photographs showed dismembered human bodies, real victims, real murder scenes. The officer immediately called for backup. Within minutes, police began searching the apartment. What they discovered shocked the entire country. Inside Dahmer's home, they found human heads stored in the refrigerator, skulls hidden inside cabinets, a large blue barrel filled with acid and decomposing bodies, and dozens of photographs documenting the murders. It was one of the most horrifying crime scenes investigators had ever seen. Dahmer was arrested on the spot. Once in custody, Dahmer did something unusual. He didn't deny anything. He didn't ask for a lawyer immediately. Instead, he began confessing. For hours and then days, he calmly described everything he had done. The killings, the experiments, the bodies. By the time the investigation was complete, police confirmed that Dahmer had murdered 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Many of them had been reported missing. Their families had searched for years. Now they finally knew the truth. In 1992, Dahmer's trial began in Milwaukee. The courtroom was filled with reporters, investigators, and the families of the victims. The main question was simple. Was Jeffrey Dahmer insane? His defense team argued that he suffered from severe mental illness. They said he could not control his actions. But prosecutors argued something different. They said Dahmer knew exactly what he was doing. He hid the bodies. He lied to police. He carefully planned his crimes. The jury agreed with the prosecution. Jeffrey Dahmer was found legally sane. He was sentenced to 15 life sentences in prison, a total of 957 years behind bars. Dahmer was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. At first, he was placed in protective isolation. But after some time, prison officials allowed him to work with other inmates. That decision would change everything. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was assigned to clean the prison gym with 2 other prisoners. One of them was Christopher Scarver. During the cleaning shift, Scarver attacked Dahmer with a metal bar. By the time guards arrived, Dahmer had suffered fatal injuries. He died shortly afterward at a nearby hospital. He was only 34 years old. The crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer shocked the world. They forced people to ask disturbing questions. How could someone hide such horrors for so long? How could neighbors, police, and entire communities miss the warning signs? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, how well do we really know the people around us? Because sometimes, the most terrifying monsters do not hide in dark forests, or abandoned buildings, or haunted houses. Sometimes, they live in the apartment next door.